I'm Wes Hartley, and I'm media pastor at Lake Pointe Church in Rockwall, Texas. I am now beginning my 19th year at Lake Pointe. I started in March of 2000.
All right, great. Thanks for that. And the first question, so can you tell me a little about Lake Pointe Church?
Sure. Lake Pointe started in 1979, and they started, their first place they met was a bait house on the shore of Lake Ray Hubbard there in East Dallas. And they had to set up, every week, and it was 7 families started the church, and that was in 1979. And let's see, this past Christmas Eve, they had about 42,000 people attend Christmas Eve services. So it's been a pretty amazing place to see grow. And as me in 2000, they were running maybe 4,000 people a week. And so it's just become a pretty amazing place. Christmas Eve isn't exactly the best, descriptor because everybody comes for Christmas Eve, but a typical weekly attendance is around 15,000.
Awesome. Wow. That was a big congregation.
Yeah, it's interesting, though. It is a big congregation, but we always talk about the church within the church. So the church doesn't seem very big because over 50% of the people are involved in a small group, or what we call a life group. It's based on the old model of a Sunday school. So we have small groups that get together, and like I've been in a small group. We've been together 16, 17 years. Our kids grew up together. So the church doesn't seem really that big because we know people that we hang out with all the time. It's kind of like going to a baseball game when they're, you know all the people that are with you. So it doesn't feel like it's big.
Okay, that's sort of like how the church was when it first started, when they had people in individuals' houses come together to meet. So that's sort of the concept. So that's awesome, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. What's interesting is that's what our pastor says all the time. We didn't invent the idea of small groups. That started on the first day of the church in Acts 1:8. Yeah. And they, gathered house to house and broke bread and listened to the apostles' teaching. And that's really what we're still doing, and it still works. It's pretty cool.
Hey, hello again. Sorry about that little praise break. Now we're back with our interview with Wes. All right. So, Wes, I think we left off on, I asked you, how does Lake Pointe utilize media in a normal week?
Okay. So, Lake Pointe utilizes media in a normal week in several ways. First, in the weekend service. The auditorium for the main campus is large. It's a 4,500-seat auditorium. So in order to help everyone stay connected and see things and basically connect to the stage and the platform, we use iMag, live cameras, and graphics and that kind of thing within the service itself. But we've gone to a multi-campus model or a multi-site model. And so we have campuses in Mesquite and Garland, all throughout the Metroplex, 7 campuses. And they watch the message and have live worship. So they have a live worship experience at their campus, and then they have the message. So that message is recorded every week on Saturday night and then delivered to the campuses to be played back on Sunday. So media is pretty essential to our weekly services because several thousand people won't have a pastor if we don't have a sermon delivered, some video. And so that model has helped us where rather than having to get
really amazing communicators to preach live at every campus. We have a great communicator that we then deliver via video to the campuses, and then the campus pastor shepherds and loves on people and helps take care of all of the processes of that campus. And so it's a different skill set that we found has worked fairly well. Additionally, media is also extended into social media and that kind of thing. And there's a pretty robust strategy for Facebook engagement. They like to engage on Facebook within hours or minutes of people making comments. And then they do a lot on Instagram as well. They're moving into Snapchat and doing some of the cooler, hipper things. But a lot of the student ministry stuff is already doing that more as a student ministry. And then the church, mainline church processes and program is mainly Instagram and Facebook and Twitter at this time.
Oh, okay, that's awesome. And the response time that you said, that must require lots of hands-on to reply within minutes or hours of a post.
The phrase we like to use is we want to be high touch, and so yes, it's technical, it's mediated media, it's a mediated communication form, but it's really high touch. So if someone asks a question, we try and get an answer really fast. And we try to respond to the social media thing just simply because it does reflect what people think. And we want to make sure that we're a good community member, and if things are being perceived as something that's not good or not healthy, we want to respond to that really quickly.
Okay. And in this social media campaign and your use of media within Lake Pointe, how do you use your volunteers?
Yeah, so the volunteers, I would call Lake Pointe a volunteer-centric environment. In other words, there's no way we could have church without volunteers. So that really, it's not only in media, but in children's ministry and student ministry, and every ministry we have, volunteers are the lifeblood of what we do. And in media, it's the same way. The way we approach it, specifically like in video and technical media, is we try to create systems and processes where the volunteer can be really successful every week. So we, as a staff, if we have a staff team, we basically set the table, is what we call it, setting the table for the volunteer. So they come in and they have scripts and they know what's going on and they're prepared, and all of the technical pieces and parts that they have to operate function properly. So there's no way that we could do it every week as a staff. That's just completely not affordable. But what we do is make sure that the volunteers are set up for success, and we give them a task that's very doable, so that they can walk away feeling successful and having contributed to the kingdom. So every week we have to have about 80 to 95 volunteers every week to make services happen at our various campuses.
Wow. So it's a lot of moving pieces, and it
is. But if you think about it, it's like the body of Christ. Everybody has a role to play, and as long as we all are cool with that role and we understand I don't have to be this person, I get to be who I am, then I can just enjoy playing that role. I have one guy, his name's Phil. He's ran graphics for me for 17 years. I actually sat down beside him last week and ran graphics with him. And he was talking about, we were reminiscing about all of the different systems we had. And he's been running graphics every other week in service for 17 years. And that's what we see, is these volunteers find what God created them to do, and they love doing it every week. It's a really cool thing to see.
Awesome. Wow, that is really cool. Especially have someone that dedicated. That's rare to find.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's rare to find nowadays. So, yeah, that's awesome. So, and in doing media, in the position that you're in with the church, what kind of challenges have you had to overcome, let's say, within the past month?
Yeah, probably the biggest challenge we have is just the growth that we're experiencing. Mm-hmm. And we'll often say, hey, this is a challenge a lot of churches don't have, so we're really grateful that this is a challenge we have. So, for example, in the next 30 days, we're going to open a new building. It's a 600-seat auditorium where our Spanish service and our classic service will have services. And so there's just a lot of logistics surrounding opening that space. We have to make sure all of the technical systems are working. Silly things like, are the doors marked with the proper sign? Do people know where to go? Can we fit everybody on the stage? Things like that, stuff you would never dream of. How do you have hymnals? Because our classic service still has hymnals. Where do those go? How do they get distributed? And that doesn't seem like media, but it really is relating to the experience that everyone has. And media is just simply a tool that guides experience and impacts experience. So that's one of the challenges we're facing right now. Most of our challenges truly are growth challenges. Because the church continues to grow, we have to find parking spaces. So if you don't have any more parking spaces, then what do? If you add services, you have to add volunteers, you have to add staffing. There's a lot of ripples to that. And so just last week we discussed our seating capacity for Easter services. We just evaluated our Easter services. And we think we have one more year of being able to do 4 services on our main campus. And then we're going to have to add another one. And so the ripple effect of having 5 services on an Easter weekend is no small thing. And so those are probably the biggest challenges, our growth challenges. But, how cool is that? Most churches are trying to figure out what to do with the rooms so they don't have to heat them. And we're trying to figure out how to add more rooms. So I'm incredibly grateful that the Lord's put me in a spot that I get to be challenged by growth instead of by death.
Oh, yes, awesome. Yeah, that is a very unique challenge, a challenge I think any church would want to take on, given the other alternatives.
I would wish that for everybody. Yeah, I would. That would be my prayer, that everybody gets to be challenged with growth, because it's a cool thing to see.
And out of these challenges, are there any lessons learned that you can share for somebody that may be coming into the challenges that you're facing?
Yeah, I would say probably the biggest lesson I've learned has been you've got to plan and grow sustainably. So what I mean by that is a lot of times we'll do something, for Easter that is really cool. We're going to use some lighting or a video thing or some special element or some, like one year we did a hashtag where people could put photos on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, and then we would gather those hashtags and put their faces up on screen. Sometimes the way churches roll is that you do that once and you've committed to do that every week. And so a lot of times the natural response when the pastor asks for media to do something is no. And the reason it's no is because they're afraid they're going to have to do it not just the 1 week, but every week after that.
Yeah.
But if you plan for sustainability, you say, okay, I can do this once, and then we'll look at what it would take to sustain that on an ongoing thing. And should we do that every week? So sustainability says I've got to throw resources at it to make it last, and I have to evaluate it critically and say, should I make it last? And so what it allows you to do is to grow and then plateau a little bit to get your book to figure out how to make it more sustainable. What's your next, what's your process to do that every week? You get that figured out, and then you just basically created a launch pad to launch into your next season of growth. So building and planning and growing sustainably is a huge lesson, because you can only run as fast as you can run for so long. At some point your heart will explode. And, marathon runners, they run and run and run and run, and then they collapse in a puddle at the end of the race. Where sprinters, they run and then they rest. They run and then they rest. They run and then they rest. And so they look really, really healthy, right? And they have muscles, and, they run their sprint, and then they run around the stadium with their flag on their back, and they're so excited. And that's really how I've tried to look at church media ministry, is to run in sprints, figure out what I need to grow, let my muscles recover, and then run another sprint, rather than run until I die on the ground.
Yeah. That is, a point that you made when you talk about plateauing, because a lot of people see plateauing as being negative, but the way that you just described it, you described plateauing as a launching pad, something flat and level for you to launch off of to your next thing. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. The Lord actually gives us a natural plateau every week because he calls it Sabbath. And so we work really hard all week, and then we rest and reflect and think and realign with the Lord. And so if we're actually following what the Bible says and giving ourselves a Sabbath every week where we can realign, then that becomes actually kind of a natural flow even in our work and our ministry. But I think sometimes we get so caught up in moving that line, up and to the right, that we forget that, there's gravity and we're working against gravity. And if we can kind of slow that growth down a little bit to make it a little more sustainable, then it becomes more fun. And that's why people can last longer, is because we've allowed ourselves to rest and think and reflect on what we're actually doing and why.
Yeah, that is a great way to look at it. And of course, as you've been talking about your problem of growth, that is obviously one of the benefits of doing the media, like marrying the media and the church. Be it social media, whatever kind of media platform that you're using. I would say one of the great benefits is that you will see growth, and not only growth, that you're actually reaching people for Christ.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's become a very cool thing to see basically how media and the church have converged. I mean, back when I started in college, way back in the dark ages, there were very few media pastors or media masters. There was, literally just a handful, and most of those guys did broadcast ministry, like that used broadcast on TV. Now it's a very common occurrence for a church of 1,000 or more to have a technical pastor or a media pastor or a technical arts pastor or some level of technical leader to try and help the church, communicate its message in the context of our culture. That's been pretty cool. The other big change that's happened has been live streaming. And the number of churches that live stream are growing exponentially. The stats on that, I don't even know how you know those stats. But all I know is that we've seen it as a tremendous growth engine for us, because our model is, if you come to Lake Pointe, you would have a neighbor or a lost friend, and you'd say, hey, come to Lake Pointe, check it out. It's totally different than normal church. I promise you won't be bored. It's really cool. The people are nice. Oh, and if you don't want to come right away, check it out online and see what it's about, and then I'll talk to you about it. And so we're using now as our live stream as almost an intermediate step from you talking about the church to your lost friend, to that lost friend actually coming to church with you, because they want to check it out and they want to see if it's legit. And it really has become a huge tool. The other piece we've seen has been that people travel a lot in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. Obviously, we have the huge Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, so a lot of people live here for the express purpose of being able to travel for business easily. And so we think it takes probably 6 weeks to see our entire congregation cycle through the church. And when those guys are out, they can still stay connected to the church by joining online. And we've seen that. I just feel like, I don't have quantitative data, but for me, it feels like people are talking about the services that they missed more, but they saw it because they were watching online, even though they couldn't attend in person. So that's been a huge piece. We do count people online. There's a method that the Internet Campus uses to do that. We always count our numbers with that number and without that number, because we want to evaluate both sides of that. But on a typical week, and we think the number's low, we're running around 4,000 people watch online.
Yeah.
And people can say, well, now they're going to stay home from church and not, attend. We actually are not seeing that to be true. We're seeing people weren't attending anyway, and now they're attending online and staying connected to the church. I don't see a downside to it. So that's been what we've learned. Obviously, all we know is what we see in our own context. But the Internet campus has been a humongous new world that has proven to be very cool.
Wow, that is, when you say about people not coming to church because they have it online, I know, from my own experience, that was one of the fears of the senior pastors at my church. They was like, well, if we give them to it online, they're not going to come to actual church. And I had to sort of frame that in a way, almost just like you said it. I was like, well, I don't think that's really the case. So slowly but surely, we're sort of working our way, down that path. But it's good to hear, some validated information that, online is just as you said, an intermediate step to someone actually coming to church. So that is a great way to put it. So is there anything else that you would like to add about streaming or the marrying of media and the church?
Well, I would say that the streaming and opening it up like that is messy. You're going to get irregular people that are in the chat rooms, and it takes discernment to know exactly how to deal with them. This past Easter, we got actually attacked. Our site got taken down by bots, and so we're starting to see people actually trying to make us not be able to stream. And so we actually see that as a positive, because that means that we're doing enough damage for the kingdom that the devil's trying to, take us down. So for that, it's cool, but it is messy, and you're going to deal with people that you normally wouldn't deal with, because they would never come through the church doors, or they'll say things that they would never say in person that they will say online. And so that's a big piece to it. The whole fact is, media is messy no matter what you do. It's expensive. It's 100% subjective. And so as a church leadership team, the church has to be on board with what we want media to accomplish. And for us, we always say it's not the tail wagging the dog. In other words, we don't do things because the lights are cool. We do cool lights because God does cool lights. Look at a sunset. And so we use lights to enhance the experience and draw people in with beauty that otherwise wouldn't. But there's people who aren't engaged by stuff that's beautiful, that thinks it's a waste. And so we have to say, that's fantastic that God's wired you up that way, but God's wired up people in a different way than you. And this experience is not just about you. We're going to try and connect with as many people as we can. And so if the church isn't, on board with why do you use media, then all of a sudden everything becomes like it's just this long line to the thermostat, and somebody wants it hotter, somebody wants it colder, somebody wants it louder, somebody wants it softer, somebody wants it brighter, somebody wants it darker. And we don't really play that game. We say, well, we have professionals that gauge this with the elders, and the leadership know what's going to happen, and we all agree to that. And so, that is what it is. And at some point, you almost have to be that way, because it is so subjective that you can end up wasting all of your energy trying to make people happy. And if the Internet hasn't taught us anything, it's that people are never happy. So it's almost impossible to make people happy. So I've decided I can't really try. So I can try not to needlessly disenfranchise people or needlessly make them mad, but trying to make everybody happy it's completely impossible.
Yeah. Well, that is a great point to make. And I would like to thank you for taking the time to speak with me, Wes. And if at all able, I would love to sit down and talk with you again as we go further into social media and starting to, I guess we're just really touching the surface on what social media and the church is actually all about. So again, thank you, and God bless.
Thank you. It's been a great time.
All right. Thanks, Wes.